Hello, and welcome to the first video in a new series I'm starting called Trilogy Time. This is a video series that I actually did a while back on my channel, at least 4 years ago at this point. The videos weren't very good, and they don't even exist on this channel anymore, so don't bother looking for them. Ever since then, it's been something I've wanted to bring back for a while. I've always been fascinated by the idea of trilogies. It seems to be a perfect number to tell a multi-part story for some reason. I think a lot of that has to do with the idea of the three-act story structure that's so commonly talked about with movies. Having a series of 3 separate films just takes that story structure and stretches each of those 3 acts out into their own individual story. In this series, I will talk about many different film trilogies and give them a trilogy rating, which will be a number out of 5. Keep in mind that I'm not necessarily rating each individual film on their own as much as I'm rating how all 3 films work together to create an overall story. Individual film quality will be somewhat of a factor, but that's not the main point. I'm also going to try to keep a ranking of all the trilogies I talk about as I go. So, without further ado, I will start this series by talking about one of my personal favorite trilogies. A film trilogy that I grew up on and have seen more times than probably any other films, besides maybe The Princess Bride. I am, of course, referring to the original Star Wars trilogy. Just keep in mind there will be spoilers ahead for all 3 of these movies. The trilogy begins with one of the most classic and iconic films of all time. The overall story and characters are decently simple in a way that makes it very easy to fall in love with them. This story is the classic hero's journey that does a great job at introducing us to the world, the characters, and the main conflict. There's really not a whole lot that I can say about this film that hasn't already been said. It does a great job at introducing the lore by slowly revealing more information over the course of the film. You never feel bogged down by world building and lore because it's integrated so naturally. The movie ends in a way where it doesn't necessarily need a sequel, but there easily could be one. This was due to the fact that George Lucas knew he wanted to make more movies, but wasn't sure if he would actually get the chance to do so. Luckily, the film made so much money that it was basically guaranteed to get a sequel. The Empire Strikes Back is not only my favorite Star Wars movie, but it's also easily in the top 5 of my favorite movies of all time. This to me is the gold standard for how to properly do the middle part in a trilogy. Instead of just simply giving the audience the same experience over again, like many other sequels have done, it takes the simple story and characters that have been set up and expands upon them in a way that feels natural, yet surprising at the same time. It takes the basic conflict of the first movie and makes it feel more personal to the characters.
I am your father.
We see characters develop a strong relationship.
I love you.
I know.
We see the heroes fail after such an amazing success in the last movie. The journey to defeating an empire is not easy, and this movie does a great job at showing that. After the humiliating defeat that the empire had, they strike back and show us that it can't always be so easy for our heroes to succeed. We also gain a much deeper understanding of the Force than the simple explanation we got from Obi-Wan. Honestly, there are so many reasons why I love this movie that I could go on forever. Just know that this is my personal favorite middle part of a film trilogy ever. It expands the universe, characters, and themes, and also leaves us on a perfect cliffhanger that demands a third part of the story to exist. Return of the Jedi is interesting in that it has some of the lowest points of the trilogy and also some of the highest. It isn't a perfectly paced film that has an engaging narrative the whole way through like the first 2 films. A large portion of this movie kinda drags, and some of the characters don't really get a lot of interesting things going on like they do in the first 2 movies. Based on this description I just gave, it sounds like this trilogy doesn't really stick the landing. Well, it kinda does. Despite some of the poor pacing and lack of interesting story beats, the finale of this film more than makes up for it. Would I have rather had a well-crafted story that naturally built up to the climax? Yes, but as it stands, the climax is great. The climax of this film works as the climax to the whole trilogy so well. It completes the story that has been set up in the most perfect way possible. Everything that happens from the time that Luke meets up with Vader for the first time in the movie until the moment where Luke honors his father's memory is just amazing. The idea that Vader was Luke's father could have easily been just a shocking twist for the sake of having a shocking twist, but it's not. That moment is exactly what defines Luke's journey in this final film. Will he be able to bring his father back to the light? Or will he himself be consumed by the darkness, becoming the next Darth Vader? The moment where Luke looks at his father's severed hand and then looks down at his own robotic hand is perfect at conveying this without any dialogue. He just did to Vader exactly what Vader did to him in the last film. Allowing himself to be fueled by his anger has led him down a path of becoming Vader. It is this moment of realization that brings him back, that stops him from continuing down that path. He throws away his weapon, in direct contrast to the time he took his weapon with him against Yoda's warning.
Your weapons. You will not need them.
This is real character growth. It is this very rejection of the dark side that makes Vader realize that if Luke can fight it, then maybe he can too. Vader has been a slave to the dark side for years, a slave of the Emperor. The only way he can break free of his chains is by actively fighting his slaver. Not out of hate, as the Emperor would want, but out of love. Out of the love he feels for his son. I could easily go into more detail about how this film perfectly completes Luke's and Vader's stories, but we might be here all day. The point is that despite the flaws I see in this film, it perfectly completes the story that was created by the previous two films. This, I believe, is enough to grant this trilogy its legendary status. I will give the original Star Wars trilogy an obvious 5 out of 5. Now, I'm going to have a ranking of the trilogies I talk about as I go. This one will always stay very close to the top. There's only one film trilogy that will most likely top this one whenever I get to it. I'm not going to say, but I'll let you all make your own guesses in the comments. Eventually, when I get to talking about that trilogy, you'll find out. Anyway, that's about all I have for this video. I'm attempting to upload at least one video to the channel every month during the year 2022. Hopefully I'm able to keep that goal, as it looks like I will probably have a very busy life this year, but I'll certainly do my best. Please check out the Waban podcast. It's a podcast I've been doing for close to a year now with a friend of mine, and we've enjoyed it a lot. There will be a few links in the description, as well as a link to the Waban YouTube channel, which houses the podcast and some gaming videos that we've started doing. We're having a lot of fun with Waban, and we'd love it if you guys would check it out. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, goodbye.